Hello, everyone, and thank you for being here. I'm Sakshee, co-founder of Thrive HQ and head of Parenting360. But more importantly, for this conversation today, I'm a mom. Like many parents, I've navigated the confusion, pressure, and constant questioning that comes with feeding our young children. Parenting360 exists because early nutrition is often discussed in extremes, while real parenting lives in the middle. Between growth charts, opinions, social media, and family advice, parents are left wondering what truly matters. Today isn't about perfection. It's about patterns over panic, progress over pressure, and informed, confident choices. That's why we've brought together a thoughtfully curated panel that consists of functional nutritionist and a feeding therapist to look at nutrition between 6 months and 5 years through medical, behavioral, and practical lens. This is a judgment-free, parent-first space. So let's begin. Today we have with us feeding therapist Seeta Shah. Seeta is a speech and language therapist with 15 plus years of experience, specializing in pediatric feeding disorder. That ranges from ages of 6 months to 17 years. She's been trained at the City University London and University College London. She brings deep expertise in supporting children with complex feeding needs. Also on the panel, we have Anushka Gokani. Anushka is a functional nutritionist and also motherhood and child mental health counselor dedicated to holistic family well-being. Recognized as the top 100 educator of the year 2019, she integrates nutrition, psychology, and sensory strategies to support neurodiverse children and perinatal health. She's a Harvard graduate whose expertise covers trauma-informed care, ADHD management, and gut-brain optimization for children and mothers. Also, we have Amal from our very own Thrive partnerships, who's going to be providing us technical support today. So welcome, all you lovely people, the parents, the moms. Please ask us as many questions as you wish to. We have a well-thought panel here to ease us out. Welcome, ladies, Seeta and Anushka.
Thank you.
Thank you for having me here.
Thank you for doing this on a Saturday and easing out our worries on the weekend. Seeta, I'll start with you.
Yes.
Would you please give an introduction about how a feeding therapist is different from a nutritionist? Because a lot of people don't know actually the difference. Feeding term is kind of misleading with the therapist. So if you could please shine some light on it.
Yes, sure. I think in the simplest way, I guess a nutritionist will look at what a person eats, and a feeding or swallowing therapist will look at how the child eats and how we actually get food inside. And I guess the feeding term, it covers children that have sensory difficulties, and that might be a reason that they're only eating specific foods. They might have physical difficulties or, difficulties chewing or with swallowing. So we cover quite a range of things when it comes under the term feeding therapist.
So it's basically an occupational therapist with masters, where it is about where you kind of expertise in feeding and feeding challenges and everything. Is that right?
So it starts off with our training. When we're trained as a speech therapist, part of the course is something called dysphagia. So that's kind of the swallowing side of things. Part of that, though, we know children that have swallowing difficulties will also have probably sensory difficulties. Occupational therapists are also trained to work with children that have feeding needs from a sensory point. I guess with my job, what I've done through experience is work with both. And I'm really lucky that I've worked with great occupational therapists, which is why I've learned as much as I have. And the experience with that really, really helps.
Great. Thank you so much for that. And Anushka, for you as well, I would really like you to shine some light on how a nutritionist is different from a functional nutritionist that you are. I don't think a lot of us parents know the difference there.
Right. So to simplify it, a nutritionist is someone who gives you a diet plan, someone who looks into any mineral deficiencies that you have, helps you kind of create a basic food system. However, a functional nutritionist, on the other hand, looks at the root cause for many issues and many concerns. And it's a lot more holistic and integrative as compared to nutrition, which is more, the tip of the iceberg instead of the entire iceberg.
So you go down deeper layers.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we not only look at nutrition, we also look at the nervous system, we also look at the lifestyle, we look at the well-being as a whole. And then we guide families and our clients towards better lifestyle wellness changes overall, and not just the food that they eat.
Okay. So can I just simplify for our parents through an example? Let me know if I go wrong. So it's probably like if you have two kids who are being fed the same food, one of them is thriving on it, the other not so much. That is where she comes into picture, when she can tell you that why is some foods not working for a particular child, how the body is reacting to enzymes and nutrition in that particular child's body. Is that right?
So it's more along the lines of how can we add value to your current lifestyle through small tweaks so that the entire family is supported and their well-being, even when you have two children with very different digestive systems or immunities. So to just add to that, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. Seeta, the next question is directed towards you. What does a normal feeding development looks like from birth to age 5? Maybe you can break it down, from birth to say around 6 months, and then like break it down into 3 points.
Yeah. So as we know, until 6 months, milk, it's only milk. Around 6 months, the reason they kind of recommend 6 months is because we're looking at the baby's readiness to eat. Okay, so that's kind of where they get that age mark from. And at that point, we want to start exploring food. So typically, that'll be purees. At that point, it really is just about that kind of exploration, getting messy, having that experience. After that, so that's between sort of 6 and 9 months. Around 8 months to 9 months, we want to start introducing lumpier textures, a bit more texture.
Right.
After that, we're introducing finger foods. So, 9, 10 months finger foods, helping to promote that sort of independence and chewing skills. Because if we're not exploring foods that need chewing, we won't know how to chew. So it's that development of chewing skills. 12 months onwards, it's more and more texture, things that need chewing, independence and self-feeding are a big thing. So by about 2 years of age, they should be eating most textures, really, really trying to self-feed and having that independence. And then we kind of get to that sort of 2 to 5 year mark where independence is there, but also they can communicate now. So preferences are, the opinions, no. That is one of the biggest things. And that's fair enough, because actually the first sort of year of life, it is about getting nutrition, getting calories, getting food in. But I think, and Anushka, you can tell me as well, but I think the rate of growth kind of changes around that mark. So they will between 2 and 5.
Maybe Anushka can lay real light on what realistically an ideal, balanced diet looks. I mean, there's an ideal balanced diet, and then there's a realistic balanced diet. And we know as moms that both of them most of the times don't match. So if you could please shed some light over that, please.
Right. So when we're looking at children from 6 months to 5 years, we have to understand that this is when majority of their brain development in childhood happens. So there are two phases. There's up to 5 years, the first 5 years of life, and then the teenage years. These are the two phases where there's the maximum development happening in a child. So it's kind of at the speed of lightning, where they're learning, they're absorbing, they're understanding things. So they need brain support the most. And brain foods are usually high in fat, because the brain is made up of fat and the brain is made up of 60 to 70% cholesterol. So we've kind of labeled cholesterol as really bad in modern society, but cholesterol is actually building blocks of brain and hormone. So when I look at a diet for a child, it has to be high in fat. And what I mean by high in fat is good fats like oil, avocado, olive oil, coconut. You have nuts, you have seeds, you have meat that's fatty. You have fish, right? So we want to be giving them all of these high fat foods. Then we also want to prioritize protein, because that's going to stabilize their mood. It's also going to help with the tissue development, with the body development, with their muscle. And then we want to give them enough hydration, which is mineral hydration, right? So it's not just like plain water, because We've all been taught vegetables are great, and we've all been taught that we need to eat a lot of vegetables. But actually, humans don't have the ability to break down cellulase, which is the enzyme that comes in a vegetable. It's just to push food around the bowel.
So it's
So
more
if you're
like
not,
fiber content, more
yes,
fiber, right? Okay.
yes. So when you're having a lot of fiber, but you're not drinking enough minerals, that fiber is actually clogging your system up. So when you're eating vegetable, you have to understand that that should not be the primary source of food. It's
Well,
not,
yeah, sorry. But as a mom, thank you so much for shining light because, as a mom, I have dealt with constipation issues with my firstborn when
yeah,
I started introducing vegetables to her because I did not have that clear understanding that,
yeah,
like you said, cellulase. I was like, this is adequate nutrition for her, but obviously I was not laying emphasis on water intake that much.
yeah,
So yeah, that's good to know that you need water to move around fiber in your body and get it out of the
yeah,
system. Yeah, I think a lot of mums here have dealt with constipation, especially in the early years. So yeah, that explains it. Thank you. Yeah.
yeah.
You were saying, sorry, please don't let me interrupt. I just wanted
No,
to
that's fine. And then
validate.
we have complex carbs. So what we want to do is we love carbs. We don't want to cut carbs down, but there's a way in which you consume carbs. So you want to heat your carbs, like cook them, then you cool them down, and then you heat them again, and then you consume them. So what that does is that it reduces the glucose spike. What happens with carbohydrates is that they break down to sugar at the end of the day. So what's when we're giving carbs to our kids like potato puree, carrot, it's high in sugar. So they also react to that as well. So carbohydrates are important, but we have to tweak them around and give them in a specific way to make them to actually optimize the true nutrients of that.
And how can we tweak according to you? Like, if I want to, because if you want to give maybe, like you said, potatoes, anything which
Yeah.
is rich in carbohydrates, how do we tweak them? What's the most efficient way to do that?
So I like cooking my carbs in bone broth or in some sort of chicken stock or meat stock. So what's happening is you're putting your carbs into water. All that carb is absorbing is water entirely, right? So instead, what I want to do is I want to increase the nutrient intake because we have kids and sometimes they're hungry, sometimes they're not hungry. And so we want to make that food nutrient dense. So how do you do that? You put that into stock that's giving you protein, it's giving you fat, it's giving you minerals and vitamins. Then you cool that down. So you just let it cool down to room temperature and then you reheat it and then you give it to your child with some fat. So that actually makes it a complete a complex carb, which means that it takes longer for the carbs to be absorbed in the body, the starch. It also gives you all your nutrients and it's also really yummy. So this you can do with any carb, you can do with rice, you can do with pasta. And kids kind of love this because it doesn't look too healthy either.
Right. That's the keyword, yummy and not
Yeah.
looking healthy. Yeah. Great. I'm going to circle back to our before the kids start all the solids and everything to weaning. And that's for you, Sita,
Yeah.
primarily. We hear a lot about baby-led weaning versus traditional weaning. In your experience, I want to break some myths here. Uh, what is the right way to wean? I mean, there's a constant battle between baby-led and traditional. And
Yeah.
having said that, in your experience, what signals should a mother get from a child to choose the method? If I
Yeah.
could just know something about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the most important thing is the child ready. So despite the approach, are they ready? Are they, able to sit with some support? Are they able to have some head control, some trunk control? Are they interested? Are they bringing things to their mouth? So if we've kind of ticked those things, then we know that they're ready. And interest is a massive thing. Like you'll see babies just kind of staring at your food. But all of those other things are important to kind of help with the safety side of eating as well. In terms of the approach, there have been phases where I remember when baby-led weaning was a massive thing. We've always had the traditional approach. And I think you've got to kind of look at what works for the baby as well. And in my experience, a combination approach is great. If you combine the approaches, what happens is you're getting exposure to all textures, which is what we want. Puree is a good one to start with because, baby can kind of explore it. We're not worried at that point about having quantity. We're just worried about that exposure. Having finger foods as well, it helps promote independence. It's helping with chewing skills. So I would say having both in the repertoire is probably the best way forward. If we're not exposed to all textures when we're young, so I know, I've had clients where the child's only ever had purees up until a year old. They haven't been, introduced to those lumpier textures. They haven't explored those. And then later on, they become fussy, they become picky because they will stick to the textures that they know that they're familiar with and feel safe with. So yeah, to answer that, I think a combination approach is the best one.
Okay, and could you just elaborate? Because, when we say a combination approach, a lot of mothers, they get confused that what is combination, because
Yeah.
I feel that there are, especially at this point of motherhood, a lot of us also deal with postpartum depression. We are thinking what is right and what is not right. So the mother's mental condition also kind of, I think it drives weaning as well. It has an impact on weaning. If you could tell us about it as per you.
Yeah. So I mean, the first sort of step is you're going to introduce the tiniest bit of puree, right? So even a spoonful, and just see how the baby responds. You can then start introducing more solid food in the sense of like having it on the side. So it's not that you're having one or the other, you're kind of doing both. And the biggest thing I would say is look at the baby's cues. What are they interested in? Are they more comfortable with the puree? Are they happy just playing with the more solid food? Having both side by side. The first month, I think you're fine with just doing the purees. After sort of 7, when you're hitting that 8-month mark, yes, we definitely want to start introducing things that they can pick up, because then we're looking at their kind of coordination as well as a bit of independence, as well as the texture. So side by side, I guess, would be the best way.
Amazing. And Anushka, you can look at it you can give us an opinion from a whole different level as well. From the psychological point of being a mum as well, what women go through during that same stage, and how can we kind of rope weaning in the most appropriate and the most safest way, not only for the child, but also for the mother. If you could just shine some light on it. Yeah.
So I think especially for first-time moms, there's a lot of anxiety with failing their children and not nourishing their children that comes into play. Anytime there's some sort of refusal, it's often felt very personally, like, am I not doing a good job? Am I not creating the environment? Yeah. So I think that safety plays a huge role, not just for the child, but also for the mom. When you're anxious, your child is feeding off your energy. So it's important to have a routine set for yourself as well, where for my clients, for example, we do a lot of affirmation work, we do a lot of self-talk, we do a lot of kind of somatic movements as well to just bring a lot more calmness. Because when you're at that table feeding your child and you're so anxious about making sure that they're going to eat enough food, sitting and counting how much they eat, it's going to also affect the way that child is getting messages about what feeding looks like. So we really want to look at those perspectives. So affirmations, doing movements and breath work really support my breastfeeding or postpartum clients when they're starting solids. And then another thing that's important, especially from the infancy part of weaning, is what you're feeding your child, the steps. So like Seeta mentioned, there's different developmental stages for swallowing and for chewing. In the same way, the gut and the immunity also has developmental phases. So up to the first 6 months, we have lipase, which is the enzyme that digests fat. That's what breast milk is essentially made of. It's majority fat, right? Then we have the protein component, the protein enzyme that comes in, which starts at 6 months. So ideally, the gut is prepared for protein. It's not prepared for fiber. What we often do is when we see on Instagram, and we usually go to a pediatricians, is they say, yeah, you can start with apple puree or you can start with veggie purees. But if your baby's gut does not have the ability to break that down, what you're feeding them is essentially not being absorbed. And it's causing things like we see eczema, we see constipation, we see food refusal at a very, very young age. So we have to feed what the body is ready for. And then after protein ramps up at 6 months, around 12 to 24 months is where we see amylase, which is in charge of starch. So starchy foods should actually be implemented post 12 months. And then we have lactase, which comes around post 8 to 10 months. So that is milk,
So that's
right?
dairy otherwise.
That's dairy. So
Yeah,
that's
okay.
any dairy product. And then we have cellulase, like I mentioned initially. This none of us have. It's just to push everything down. So fiber actually is just to create movement in the bowel and to slow down certain absorption of starches. But it's a lot more adult than it is child.
Ah,
So when you're feeding your baby, you have to feed them according to the development of their gut as well.
Do you have,
right.
Anushka, do you have any examples like for that first kind of experience of weaning of specific foods that would be good for exploration?
Yeah. So I love butter and yolk. So you have like a slightly runny egg yolk and you add some butter to it. So when you say a puree, that kind of gives you that puree consistency, and it also gives you the fat and the protein that the body actually is able to absorb. And then in Indian cultures, we have a lot of ghee that's introduced to the child. And that is great because it lines the gut, it's good for immunity. It has vitamin A, D, E, and K, all of those things. You also have meat purees that you can make. Um, and then I'm a big supporter of stewed apple. So what that does is it acts as a prebiotic, and we're lowering the fiber in that when we're stewing the apple. So that also then is a safe puree to have. And then as and when, the baby's used to these foods, you can start cooking your carrots and your potatoes in broth or in meat stock. So and then you can change the consistency based on their development as well. So these are some things that I do suggest initially.
I
And
find
it
it really interesting because from like what we, and I guess maybe pediatricians would often recommend is stuff like avocado or
Yeah.
courgette or broccoli and things like that. So that traditionally that's what we recommended, but from a gut point, it's interesting to hear from you kind of alternatives.
Yeah. Yeah. So avocado is great. It's very low in fiber, very high in fat. So that's a great first food. And then you can have avocado in different consistencies. So you have mashed, you can have the little pieces that they can chew on. But broccoli, again, extremely high in fiber. So that actually does not get digested.
Okay. Also, Anushka, you just mentioned egg yolk.
Yeah.
I'm sure a lot of moms like me, we were suggested and advised to not introduce it until much later,
Yeah.
because eggs may not be pasteurized, they can cause some kind of infection. What do you have to say about that? Also, how good when you say bone broth or stuff like that? Uh, can we all are working moms? Uh,
Yeah.
does store-bought count, or should that be a no-no when it comes to that?
Okay, so I'll start with the egg.
Yeah.
Okay. So, most of our vegetables and fruits also have a lot of pesticide residue on it. So there's no 100% where something is entirely clean. We can all do our best in terms of sourcing. When it comes to allergies, right? It's the egg white that triggers an allergic response, not the yolk. So when you start with the yolk and then eventually after 3 weeks or a month you introduce the white, the body actually takes it much better. So that's the mistake that people make is they do an entire egg or they think that the white should go first.
Right.
Um, so that's one thing. Another thing is there's a lot of research now, and I think you can see that on solid starts as well, where they want to introduce allergens before 12 months
Yeah.
to kind of reduce the allergic reaction of the child. So in this way, what yolk does is it actually does not trigger a histamine response. It supports the gut development so that when you have other allergens to introduce, the gut actually is not reacting to it, it's more prepared. So yeah, so that's the yolk
So you're saying
question.
it is safe to introduce egg yolk as one of the first foods as
Yeah,
well. It's absolutely fine. Okay,
yes.
great.
It's actually one of the best foods to start solids with.
Nice. And I'm sure all the Desi moms and especially all the grandmoms are hooting for you right now since you mentioned ghee, because we all are very ghee phobic these days. And I'm a Punjabi, so I am all pro ghee, but I'm
Yeah,
sure that kind of gives a nice light to it that ghee is good, guys. Please feed it to your kids. It'll help them in their
yeah, no, it's a
healthy,
superfood.
basically. Yeah. So
To answer the bone broth question,
yeah.
so we always want to start with stock because it takes lesser cooking time as compared to broth. So broth takes longer to cook, so it's more concentrated, right? Now, when you have a weak gut, we call it a virgin gut for children because it's so immature, right? When you have a immature gut, broth becomes slightly heavy to digest because it's so potent. So always start with stock. Then after a year of stock or 6 months of stock, you introduce broth. I'm not against store-bought stock or broth. Spinneys has some great chicken stock. There's many companies that have good quality stocks as well. What I don't like is the stock cubes that you get.
Yeah.
That's not real food. So you want to make sure that your stock is in a nice packet, and if you store it, it kind of gets a little jelly-like. And then over time, you do broth. So there's companies like the butchers, they do a lot of broths. Then we have uh, Heal with Hadil has her company. I forgot what it's called. Sorry. I'll just have to check and let you know. But basically she started her own broth company and she has kiddie broths as well and she has broths for adults. So for busy moms, broth is a great alternative. You have a child who's a little fussy, you can just cook some rice in it, make it a little porridge and feed them, and they're having a great healthy meal. Add some butter to it, add some ghee to it. It's a super meal for them.
So it is okay to get store-bought broth as long as it's not in those concentrated cubes.
Yeah, no
Yeah.
cubes and no concentrated pastes. We don't want that at all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you. For Sita now. Sita, I personally feel, and I get this asked a lot, especially around my family, that many parents feel that the child knows how to eat, but the children, they still refuse. So now, from your lens, what's the difference between can't eat, won't eat, and isn't ready to eat as yet? I mean, this is something which is like a constant battle, even with parents.
Yeah.
So
I think if we think about can't eat, it's going to be probably related to something skills based. So can't eat to me would suggest, they're having difficulty chewing or manipulating the food for some reason. So more of like a physical reason probably, or a skills reason, developmental. If it's that they won't eat, that suggests more kind of avoidance, maybe some anxiety, that kind of thing. What was the last one? The last one was
isn't ready to eat.
isn't ready to. So that
Yeah.
again goes back to, I'm assuming this applies to children when they're kind of around that 5-6 month mark. Isn't ready to eat, again, would be developmental. Maybe they're not sitting up as well. Maybe they don't have that head control. Maybe they're not interested yet. It can still differ depending on the child.
My husband and I have had close to world wars when it came to all of these three questions, right on the feeding chair, especially when it was isn't ready to eat and won't eat situation. So what you're saying is that as soon as the child, can hold their head and is ready to try on new food, so they are ready to eat.
They're showing interest. They're bringing hands to mouth. They're bringing objects to mouth. I think the other thing to think about is that's one side of it. If they're a little bit older, is there anything else going on? And we always want to check out, in terms of medical, is there anything else going on? again, from what Anushka's saying in terms of gut, is there anything else going on? So that, there is a bit of crossover there. It's just important to kind of check through everything so we know what the reason might be.
Okay, but children can tend to be fussy, right? They are. I feel like for my daughter, she was very routine driven. She didn't want it to change. If she was especially moving from purees to more lumpier purees was a definite challenge for her. So what do you suggest should be like a wait out period before that maybe get them checked for something?
Yeah, I mean, when they're little, it's still again about that exposure, and there's still going to be some things that they like and don't like. The first kind of 2 years is, like I said, about that exposure. Just expose them to all of the foods. Again, they might not like the lumpier foods. We need to kind of understand why. Maybe there's a little bit of sensitivity going on there in the mouth or the hands, something like that. From 2 to 5, that is that period of being fussy anyway. So they will drop foods, they'll have their preferences, they will say no to certain things. I think as long as they're not dropping kind of like whole textures or whole food groups, it's kind of normal just to let them do that. And, they will stick to things that are familiar. That's fine, as long as they're still getting a reasonable amount of food in and there's a bit from each of the food groups. Like I said, when it's one whole food group, when there's distress, when they're getting really upset, when meal times are really difficult, that's when we want to start thinking, okay, what's going on, and do we need to get some help for this?
And what about you, Anushka? Like, how important is texture progression in the first year, and what happens if children stays on purees for too long? Like, in accordance to you, how does it shape your opinion on it?
Right. So I think Seeta mentioned some very important points like exposures. That's also something that I tell parents, that you have to at least expose your child to a type of food, the same texture, the same way that it's being fed to them at least 22 to 30 times before you accept it as a refusal. What happens, what I see with parents is they're trying to give their kids something new, and there's refusal the first 3 or 4 times, and they're already so tired and they're taking it so personally that it's just a complete no, like my child will not eat, my child is picky. And then there's a sense of panic. And what that does is that creates so much dysregulation in the parent-child dynamic and makes food extremely unsafe. So the child is already stressed before they're at the table. And then all you're going to get is pushback, and you're going to get fussiness. So it's not that children want to be fussy or like they're trying to, push boundaries on purpose. It's that we need to build more safety by making that food look safe.
I do understand that because, feeding time, especially when we're doing for our young ones, like between like the first year of feeding, it is stressful for most of the moms, because of course the emotional connect is there, that I have worked so hard making something that, they would like, and then there's an instant rejection, or the food is everywhere but their mouths. So and I do feel that when kids are kind of forced on the feeding table or are not they're not let go if they want to end the feeding session, it just is very stressful, even for the mom and the family around it. So I think this is very important for moms, especially, or the primary caregivers, to realize that the atmosphere around feeding should be stressful to the least. Is that right?
And I was going to say the pressure in the first 12 months can be off, because actually milk is still that main supply of nutrition and calories, right? And actually meal times don't have to be long those first few months when you start weaning, like 15 minutes just for that little bit of exploration, once a day. Then you can gradually kind of increase it. So hopefully as a parent, if you know that, you can kind of worry less about how much is going into the child. When we hit that 12-month mark, we will start reducing milk. So then the food intake goes up. But until then, exploration, exposure, fun, getting messy, all of those things.
Yeah.
So mommies, please let your kids get messy. It's more about experiential, like, they're experimenting, they're experiencing. It's okay for them to
I
get
think
that.
we have to let them get messy, because one of the other things is when we look at kind of sensitivities, so sensitivity in the mouth, around the face, the hands, If we're over wiping constantly, children become more sensitive. So we don't, as adults, we don't necessarily want the mess, but the child needs to have that mess, because if they then become more sensitive around the face, on the hands, there are foods that they're more likely to not want.
Correct. Okay. Another trouble that a lot of us mums, parents are facing is, I wouldn't say trouble, I just think it's kind of easier for us to show our kids screens and kind of get away with easier feeding, like, just deviate their attention and they open the mouth for you. How do you think, screen plays what kind of a positive or negative role in developing feeding habits in children? And I'd like you both to answer. Maybe we can start with Anushka and then we can go on to Seeta. But I really want to know this because we have mums who say that, well, I don't have any choice. I cannot let them, mess around the place, and then I have to clean them, and we have jobs and whatever set of their answers is to that. But how important is letting them focus on the food and not deviate their attention while these habits are being formed?
Right, that's a great question. So the thing is, as adults, we get very triggered by mess because we've kind of been raised to clean up, to make sure that everything is spick and span, especially as women. So when we have a little child who's throwing everything around, there's more food on themselves, on their chair, or the surroundings, it's extremely triggering and it's a lot of work. You're a sleep-deprived mother, and the last thing you want to do is bathe them again. So keeping that in mind, we have to understand that babies and toddlers learn through their senses first. So when, like Seeta very clearly said, that they have to be messy, they're learning to build a relationship with that food item based on the mess, because they need to explore those textures, not just in their mouth, but in their hand, the way it smells, the way it sounds. So we're looking at actually teaching them about food and building a food bank based on this mess. So when you look at it as like, okay, it's kind of like sending my kid to school. Look at mealtimes as that. They should be playful, they should be fun, they should be messy, and they should be all about learning about that food. So I think that plays a huge role in the way that we deal with this particular situation about the sensory integration of food.
And Seeta, to you, what do you think of it, and how do you think that how of a evil necessity is screens now?
Yeah,
Kids?
I think extended screen time is an issue anyway, and we know through COVID that was a massive coping method for lots of families, right? Just the screen, we're trying to work, all of that, but we know children's communication, attention is impacted by that. If it's feeding time, I can really understand some of the reasons. Look, if we put them in front of a screen, that mealtime is going to be quicker. We don't want the mealtime to be going on for 2 hours. Two, they're going to eat whatever food I'm giving them. But what the child is doing is, again, it's avoidance. I'm just going to focus on this. It could be really overwhelming for them. They're not processing what they're eating. They're not participating in that mealtime because their focus is on that screen. So in terms of good experiences and thinking of the long run, it's not something that's going to be as helpful. What I often suggest is, look, if that screen is still something that needs to be a part of mealtime, how about we say, look, we're going to eat this much, and then afterwards, you can have your TV, you can watch your movie, you can have whatever it is you want to have. That will be there. Let's eat first and then try it. I don't know that it always works, but it's a suggestion as a way of a compromise, I guess. But having it for the entire meal isn't really the best way if we want to set those good kind of experiences for the child, to show interest in the food, to understand the food, to enjoy the food, and have that kind of social aspect at meal times as well.
So basically, parents should really be patient about it and not try to
it's not easy.
Rush the feeding training that it's essentially feeding training, right? You're teaching them how to build up the relationship with food. So yeah.
And I've got an example of, one young man that I worked with where they couldn't get food into him unless there was a screen in front of him. So in the therapy, what we kind of did, and we were doing a home visit, you're going to watch 2 minutes and then we're going to stop it and then you're going to eat this many spoonfuls. And then gradually, then you can have it back on, and gradually you kind of extend the boundaries of that so that there's less time on the screen. But, taking that away completely as well is not great for the child. It's going to cause more drama as well. So trying to kind of find a way to separate it out a little bit could be another way to do it.
Great. So negotiations. I think they're learning early.
You don't want that all the time. Yeah, you don't want negotiations all the time, but as an initial starting point, and again, I would say something like that, do it under the advice of a therapist just to guide you through it, so that we're not then stuck with just doing that for all meal times as well,
Right. Seeta, another thing was that, many parents feel that the child knows how to eat. But they do experience things like gagging. They have to go through force feeding. And how does this pressure shape a child's long-term relationship with food? Even if, according to parents, the nutrition is technically adequate. So what do you have to say about that?
Again, it goes back to not having a good experience with food, and we've got to figure out why are they gagging. Obviously, gagging early on is something will happen with new textures. So in the first year, if it's a new texture, or if you've taken, even after 1 year old, if you've taken too much of a bigger bite or overfilled your mouth, gagging is a natural response to that. But if it's happening frequently, we've got to figure out why. Usually it might be something to do with sensitivity in the mouth. It could be with the way the food looks, but again, that's something that needs to be investigated.
And when do you think parents should actually go the professional route to know whether a doctor or a therapist needs to be, roped in, where gagging
the number one sign is probably mealtimes being difficult. So, the battleground, we call it, where the parent is stressed, the child is stressed. That's one of the biggest things, as well as like the impact on health and weight. If you're seeing something going on there, that's another reason. If meal times are really, really long, if they're gagging, any of those things initially are things that are kind of the red flags. If they're eating something, if they've been eating fine, but then they're dropping whole groups of textures, whole groups of food, those are kind of the markers of like, let's just get some more advice. And quite often we'll have a family come in for a consultation, and it might be that we can give you home strategies to try out for a little bit. It's not necessarily that a child is going to be coming in for therapy for sure. It's always good to have home strategies to try first. If those don't work, then therapy is the option.
And since you mentioned red flags, what feeding behaviors are considered red flags as per you?
Yeah, so again, avoidance, extreme anxiety around food, just that the stress of eating, right? Not enjoying food. Some of the kids, they'll go to kids' parties and they'll completely not eat anything. Being able to travel, parents say, I can't travel with my child because there's no food that they're going to eat. We have to take food with us. Gagging, not wanting food on your hands, avoiding smells, moving away from food. All of those things are signs of something not quite being right. If, in that sort of typical fussy phase, if they're dropping foods, but we're still adding more foods into the repertoire, that's okay. And they're still getting a bit of each of the food groups. But if any of these other things are going on, then it's a good time to get some advice.
Okay. And Anushka, what do you think? What kind of feeding behaviors are red flags from your point of view?
I think Seeta's covered quite a bit on that, but I think anything where they're falling sick too often, there's some sort of skin condition, like you have eczema or you have a rash that comes up, and then gut issues. So babies, children, everyone needs to at least poop once a day. And when you don't see that happening, at least once to twice a day after when you reach toddlerhood, when you don't see that happening, that's not healthy. So the bowel movements, it's the bloating, they're having, constipation or strained poops and then diarrhea. So you want to really look at that gut health and see if something is wrong with that.
Okay. Also, I wanted to know, maybe both of you can take this turn by turn, but at what point does picky eating stop being a phase and become a feeding challenge that parents should not wait out? They should bring it to a professional help. Because a lot of parents, I really feel, toddler until 5 years, and of course picky phases they go on, but specifically in those first, I think 2 to 5 years, when does the whole the picky phase needs professional help?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to some of the things that we've mentioned, which is, that they are dropping whole food groups, that it's becoming distressing. Typical like fussiness will be, look, they'll just not be interested in some new foods, or they'll eat something one day and not eat it another day, but you're still able to keep adding new foods, different foods into the repertoire. And again, like Anushka was saying, it takes a lot of exposure for them to accept it. If it's just a straight out no, and then they're starting to drop foods as well, I think that's a point that we need to get the advice as well.
And how much do you think that we should, keep on offering the same kind of refused food again and again, so that they can, what do you have to say about that? Because when I was feed training my daughter, I was asked to, kind of serve her, even if she's refused what I'm serving her, serve her at least 3 days in a row.
Yeah.
And let
at
her
least 10 to 15 times, like minimum 10 to 15 times. And it might be, look, you don't have to give a whole big plate full of it. So you could have some food that's familiar and have a small portion of whatever it is that they've refused, or the new food. Because again, that takes that pressure away of, oh, that's all I have to eat. Like there's something here that I know, and there's something here that I'm not sure about. And over time, they might get more curious. Everyone has preferences as well, is the other thing. So it might be, after that 20th exposure, that it's still a no. All right, that's fine. Let's choose something else. As long as we're replacing and we're not just completely dropping foods,
I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To add to that, so one is that I see even infants have picky eating issues. So it's not that it's just in toddlerhood, it could happen at any age and any stage. We see extremely young kids, very like early onset in toddlerhood, have pediatric feeding disorder, or ARFID, which is avoidant restricting food intake disorder. So it's not that you should wait it out very long. You don't take too much time to get support, because often the child is really struggling. They're not trying to do it to kind of push boundaries or just because they're being picky or fussy. So they're not only struggling with their nutrition, but they're also struggling emotionally and mentally. And it's a lot of trauma as well for them, and it affects their mental health. So I had a client last year who came to me because her daughter wasn't eating the same way for a week. And we actually worked on it, and we realized that it was a lot of gut issues and the anxiety coming from the mom, where the child didn't feel like mealtimes were safe. So we worked on building safety. We worked on working on her gut. We worked on the mom. And this child eats everything. In like 2 weeks, she was just back to the whole rotation. And then we were just working on feeding her developmentally appropriate. So I think that makes a huge difference, is to not just feel like, oh, I have a baby and my baby's just going through a phase. Babies also have it rough and they can't communicate that.
Exactly.
You know,
Yeah.
with a
And I
toddler,
think
at
it's less
least they can
typical.
communicate. Yeah.
It's less typical before 2. So if it's happening more before the age of 2, then it's definitely something to check out.
Yeah.
And I think all of us want to know that how can parents manage food refusal without too much stress? Whoever would like to take it up first.
Without too much stress. Well, do you know what? One of the things is routine. I think routine is like a really big part. It's really hard for parents because, you want your child to be nourished. And I think Anushka was saying it before, you were saying before, that you kind of feel like a failure if you're not getting that food into the child. But if we have a look at what promotes a good mealtime routine, predictability. So knowing that I'm going to be eating my snack at this time, I'm eating my meal at this time. Where are you eating? You know, what's the space that you're eating in? And keeping things as calm and social. Like the social side of it is something that we don't always think about, but mealtimes are social. You know, we have parents and nannies that run around the room and then they have to run out of the building, and that shouldn't be happening. You shouldn't be chasing your child to get them to eat. So if that's happening, you know, there's something that needs to be adapted there. And the best thing is getting them in a place where everything is predictable. So timing, location are really key to that.
Right. And Anushka, point of view on that?
I mean, everything she said is what I would say. To add to that, I feel like the more consistent you are, sometimes variety is more of a myth and it's more of an add-on or a cherry on top as compared to your daily basics. So kids thrive on routine and they thrive on structure. They don't actually need to be exposed to 100 new foods. So that's my take on that. Another thing is, so I had a client who was getting very frustrated with her toddler because all he wanted to do was play while eating, and she just wanted him to sit in one spot, and there was a lot of power struggles happening there. So we want to understand that it's developmentally appropriate for when you have a child who moves from infancy to toddlerhood, where first they're passively just sitting and, you know, like their movements are so small. And then they realize, oh, I have legs, I can run, I can do all of these things. So sometimes it's developmentally appropriate for your kids to be distracted or want to do other things, right? So it's important to make food a fun game. Like she said, like Seeta mentioned, we'll do 2 minutes of TV time and then we'll do these bites. So if your toddler's playing and they want to run around, they can do one sprint, come back, have a couple bites and, you know, go back. So it's how you make it easier for you, and that becomes a gamified routine as well, which makes food safe and fun.
Yeah, so yeah, because I also have noticed that, you know, parents often focus on what their child is eating versus the behavior at the table. And I think that really matters a lot than the food itself in the early years. I think that should be given priority, how everybody else in the family is reacting to food, their relationship with food. Is that right? I mean, Sita, can you please tell me?
Yeah, I quite often will say, you know, have a meal, have something to eat with your child, so you're providing that good model to the child as well. But yeah, those kind of early kind of parts of structure, routine, all of that is something that the children are going to take up into adulthood, right? The way we were kind of shown how to do things when we were little is how we progress and do things now. But it also, like I said, that predictability, that calmness, all of that just promotes a good experience around eating. And that's what we want, because children remember bad experiences, no matter how little they are, they remember them. And, you know, we probably, and Anushka, you also, you know, I get 6, 7, 8-year-olds that come in, and it's a lot harder at that point to work with them and change the habits. So if we can get in there early, you know, then we can manage things a bit easier, even if they do get fussy.
Yeah.
Nicely put. I am a firm believer of setting routine, and we have food, all the meals I try that we have it together, or at least even if the children are home with a caregiver or a nanny, the nanny eats with them. So, you know, they always have a companion, and it's just not an activity that a child, or a show that the child has to perform by themselves. But, you know, it's like a good conversational sort of a structure where they talk about stuff or they do eat together or something. So I'm a firm believer in that. So definitely, and that has helped me a lot. So thank you for that. Anushka, one thing that you know, like has been picking up my brain lately is how important are supplements. I'm not talking about the vitamin D's and the iron that we are supposed to give to kids when they're like in their formative years. But other than that, like, you know, there are so many supplements today available in the market in the form of gummies and everything. How important or necessary are they for young children, or is it just a marketing gimmick, or how do we go about it? You know, because there's a lot of pressure on parents, on moms, I know that my daughter comes home and she says, one of my friend is having that gummy and I want that. And, so that's why she's more tall, or that's why her hair is better. So could you please shed some light on that, please?
Okay, great question. So I actually love supplements. However, it's not for everyone. Gummies are predominantly sugar. So very little nutrition in that. A lot of the supplements that you get that are easily available, the quality of the ingredient in it is not necessarily absorbable by the body, and it's not even a good quality. So let's say, for example, you're talking about the iron medication. When you're taking iron supplements, a lot of that iron is either chemical or plant-based, which the body does not absorb. So we get most of our iron from heme iron, which is red meat sources or poultry. So it's, of course, your diet really makes a huge difference. I feel like supplementation should be essentially omega, magnesium, and methylated Bs, because the life that we live today is highly stressful, highly fast, and these are things that are not easily replenished in our food. So it really depends on where are you getting a supplement, what is the supplement, the quality of the supplement, and why you're taking it. Supplements are great if you have someone directing you in a way where it actually works for your body.
So I think consulting a pediatrician or a dietitian should be the way for it, right?
Right.
Versus
So
to the fads of, that one and this one.
for sure.
Yeah.
For sure. Also, just to put it out there, pediatricians are good with pharmaceuticals, but they have very less nutrition knowledge or training in their medical training. So what happens there is that they're just giving you, okay, you need calcium, I'm going to give you this version of calcium. Whereas when we're trained in nutrition or in supplement advisory, we're taught of the different forms of calcium and what works for who. So it's very important that when you get supplement advice, you get it from someone who has training in supplementation.
Right. Okay. Great. Seeta, my next question is towards you primarily about sugar intake. How is, for kids especially, where a feeding therapist is needed, how does sugar play a role in regulating their behavioral development towards food, and how much sugar is appropriate sugar?
Yeah. Do you know what? I think Anushka might be better placed to answer this one in terms of
Because I've
the
heard a lot
impact.
about, sugar rush, and you should not be giving, especially children who are being treated by feeding therapists who are, so they kind of go like no sugar at all, because they might just get very excited and they
Yeah.
might have sugar rush. So avoid those at all times, which
Yeah,
is
I think it
bad in the
depends on the
body.
age. So age is a thing as well, and I'm going to let Anushka take this one as well. But it's we have to think about balance, right? We have to think balance,
Right.
and it's impossible to cut it out completely. The sugar is going to creep into something somewhere. But I guess it's like looking at reading the ingredients on food that you're eating, that you're buying, and yet they might get the sugar rush. So I would say you've got to think about the time of day that if they're going to have it. And Anushka, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm thinking probably earlier on in the day rather than, midday rather than last thing in the evening, first thing at night, first thing in the morning. But yeah, I'm actually going to let Anushka take this one because I think she'll have a bit more
And
to tell us.
Anushka, while you're at it, also let us know about how parents should approach snacks as well, sugar and snacks. Because the market is flooded with sugary stuff and snacks, especially for the age group of the age group that we are talking, up to 5 years. So please tell me your views about that.
Right. It's overwhelming the amount of products available in the supermarkets. So let's understand sugar a little bit. So sugar basically is a molecule, right? It's not just processed sugar. It's not just sugar in different forms. Sugar also comes from fruit. It also comes from carbs. So all of that breaks down to the same molecule, wherever you get it from. So let's say, for example, if I have a child who wakes up in the morning and the first thing I give my child is a banana, we know from our cultures, bananas are great. They're so healthy, good for the gut, all of that. However, I'm not very pro that, because that banana is going to be absorbed so quickly. And the first thing that's going to be absorbed from that banana is not the vitamins and minerals, it's the sugar. So it's how you consume that, right? So sugar is not just about chocolates and candies. The next thing that I want to say is that it's how we label things to kids. The more restrictive we make something, even as adults, it's hard for us to control our own diets. So when children don't have the brain capacity to make decisions or to have that control, it's hard for them as well. So when I look at sugar, what I would do is have alternatives that are fun and that are actually healthy for them available, so that sugar does not become this thing where they're going crazy just thinking about it. And like Sita said, I don't recommend, a lot of sweet foods at the end of the day, for sure, because that affects the quality of sleep, and it also affects the way that the routine plays out. But a quick tip for anyone, like if you're out, and you're having a family day and there's a waffle and your child wants a chocolate waffle and you can't say no, what you want to do is, give them some fat before they have the sugar.
Oh,
So it's not being directly absorbed into the bloodstream. You're balancing the blood sugar and they're not going to be that affected.
when you say
So,
fat, what do you mean by that?
like, carry a little box of nuts,
Okay.
or like you can make these date and nut and seed balls and just carry those. Sometimes it's like, you know what, we can have that waffle. Why don't you have two of these chocolate balls and then we can have some of the waffles? So, one is that they're eating something that's healthier. Two is that they're not going to be as hungry for that entire waffle, so you can share it. And three is you've not necessarily said no, so you're not going to get a tantrum in the moment, right?
I agree, yeah. And how
Yeah.
can snacks be intentionally, given without killing appetite or also encouraging constant grazing? Because
Okay,
I think
so
children are more interested in crunchy bits more than
yeah,
the table and
that's
eating.
a very toddler thing. And I'm sure, like Sita, correct me if I'm wrong, but kids like the crunch after
Okay.
they've been introduced to food. They
I still
love
like
that
crunch.
sensation.
Yeah.
Yeah. So snacks, I love snacks. I think that snacks can be lunch and snacks can be dinner. So what you want to do is just maximize the nutrient in that snack that you're giving them.
Okay.
So something that I like giving as a snack is a hot chocolate. So I have a recipe that I give my clients, which is a stock-based hot chocolate, and it actually doesn't smell or taste like stock once you cook it. So you think, and your child thinks that you're having a hot chocolate and you're really enjoying it. But what it is like a quick drink that's giving you fats, it's giving you protein, it's giving you magnesium, it's giving you all of those good nutrients. Um, and then I love like a good tofu mousse. So it's a chocolate mousse, no sugar, made with tofu, and you can have that as a snack. You can have that as a dessert. So it's not about labeling foods.
It's
Um,
finding your way around
yeah.
it.
And a quick tip, like when you're at a supermarket, the first five ingredients are the ones that are in surplus in that product that you're buying. So look at the first five ingredients. If it's a seed oil, put it back. And if you don't understand what the words mean, put it back.
Or Google, maybe. That's what most of us
Google.
do.
But
Yeah.
usually they put all these complicated words because it's so much chemical, right? So you don't want that for yourself. So just
Right.
put it back.
I've
So
been guilty of, adding stock to everything that my children have had. Hot chocolates, dal rice, even their
yeah,
pudding, pancakes, everything, and they don't get to know the difference. So, and somewhere I am like at peace that okay, they had something nutritious. So yeah,
yeah.
yeah. Okay, and the next question is directed to Sita. Sita, when should a parent consider working with a feeding therapist?
Yeah, okay. Again, some of the things that we've covered, but in summary, I guess the biggest thing is that stress, that battleground, mealtimes taking, more than 30, 45 minutes, weight loss, health impact, endurance levels. Is that child getting really, really tired because they're not getting enough food inside them? sensory issues. So if they're becoming avoidant of smells, if they're getting really distressed with food touching their hands or their face, if they're needing lots of distraction at meal times, all of those things. And again, if they're dropping textures, if they're only eating certain textures, they're only eating crunchy foods, if they're dropping whole groups, like they're dropping vegetables, we don't eat any vegetables, we don't eat any fruits, that's a good time to get a consultation. It might be, again, we have to think about, have they been exposed to some of these things in the first place? Or is there something else going on? So, quite often it's a good idea just to have a consultation, because we have to get to the root of what's going on and have some history behind that child's development to then know, right, is this typical? Can we give you a few things to go home and deal with? Or actually, will that child benefit from some therapy? We don't want children in therapy unless they absolutely need it. And even then, therapy is a combination approach of the child coming to a session and the parents and the child having work to do at home, and having like a consistent approach. So I think if any of those things are happening, then it's a good time to get some advice.
And is there any U-turn, Seeta? Like, is there any time? Can we always come back and re-establish, a relationship with food for our
Absolutely.
children and for us? Is there
Definitely.
is there an age limit to that, or can that be done?
No, I mean, what I'll say is when they get older than 5, it gets harder because, they've got a little bit more anxiety. They've got their safe foods. What we have to look at is what's going on behind it. If we can get that anxiety under control, if we can get them to feel more comfortable around food in like a non-threatening way, if parents and therapist and child are kind of consistent in what we're doing, especially parents and therapists, like we really have to think about our language. We have to think about the level of pressure around mealtimes. That pressure can look really different. You've got the one extreme where that child is being force fed because we just need to get that food into them, down to the other scale where it's like, oh, do you want to just try a little bit? Do you want to try this? But that's, for a child, that's still focus on something that they're not comfortable with right now.
Right.
If we can get those things under control, we always see change. Progress is small steps, especially as they get older. But as long as we're going in the right direction, and you'll see the physical difference in a child when the parents are, really managing their own emotions, their own anxieties, that you see that child just relax a little bit more. And at that point, what happens is that they're more willing to at least try something. They might try something and not like it, but at least we've got to that point.
And I also think, children are great mimic artists. So they kind of model and mimic your behavior around the table. So I think when that gets into the parents' head that, okay, if I need to change their relationship with food, let me mimic it first in my behavior and model it. And I think that can work as well, right? Even for
And I think it's less stressful for the parent. Imagine some parents are cooking like 5 different meals, and it's just like what you go through as a parent trying to manage that. If we can get these things under control, yes, it's about the child, but it's about the parents as well. Like we have to really support, yes, we can do therapy, but we have to support the parents in the home and help manage what they're going through as well.
Elaborating on that, Anushka and Seeta both, how can parents model healthy eating habits, like, your top 5, maybe, or top 2, whatever, from the expert eye?
I'll go back to like routine, having a good social experience around food, modeling. So, having that meal with your child. I guess those would be my key ones.
So for me, and to add on to what Sita said, I think that food is triggering for a lot of people, including parents. So often when I have mums who come to me, they actually didn't have a good relationship with food growing up. They didn't have a good relationship with food in their childhood, sorry, in their adulthood either. So when you're trying to do better for your child, you're trying to teach them in a way where it never happened for you. But kids pick up on unconscious behaviors a lot more than conscious behaviors. So what they're doing is also modeling your nervous system and your relationship with food, which becomes triggering for a parent because it's a pushback that you're not expecting. So it's very important to also do the work, no matter how tired you are of doing the work, because your child is picking up more from your unconscious than what you're doing presently. So they're picking up both, and it gets confusing, right? It's not one messaging, it's two very contrary messaging. So I think that is a huge thing for me when I work with parents, whether it's for them or whether it's for their children, is that you have to be more regulated around meal times, and you have to have habits that your child is watching, because they're learning the most from observing you, not from what you're saying. Because your actions are daily, right? And what you're saying is in the moment.
I agree.
So
Yeah.
that's my big key point.
Amazing. And when should parents seek nutrition support?
So
Professional nutrition support. I'm not talking about aunties and
yeah.
mother-in-laws and mothers. Professional nutrition support.
Right. So I think that it's important for everyone consistently through the year. How we eat shapes the way that we feel, the way that our body works, the way our body heals, recovers, our gut health, immunity. When it affects so much of your daily life, it should be a priority. So it's like going in for a health checkup to a doctor, getting your blood work done, every 3 months or something. Nutrition should be put at that priority as well, because you're doing it in and out. You're having 3 to 5 meals a day.
Correct. Okay. Well, that kind of brings us to the end of the session. If both of you ladies are fine, can we please pick up some questions from the questionnaire that, our moms, our parents have been constantly typing? So I'm just going to pick up some. One is directed to you, Anushka. Cow's milk. When is it safe to give, if it is safe to give?
Right. So, like I said, lactase usually comes up a little later in infancy. So, I think post 8 to 10 months is safe. However, I would say start with goat milk, because that's closer to breast milk by composition than cow's milk is. And often, because in today's world we have homogenized or pasteurized cow's milk, that actually kills the enzymes that help you break lactase down. So, it's a little counterproductive. So I wouldn't prioritize milk as a food that you have to give your child. I would rather you do yogurt or kefir or meat stock as an alternative. But if you do want milk, then goat's milk is a much better alternative.
Okay, great. And one more question is for Seeta. Well, many children eat well at daycare but refuse food at home. What does this usually tell us about feeding dynamics rather than the food itself?
Yeah, and this happens a lot, because if you think about it, home is probably where they have a bit more control. Home is a comfort zone as well. And I'd look at kind of the environment and what's happening at meal times. You've got to think about nursery and school. They're also getting model from other children. They're seeing what other children do as well. So where the home is like the safest place, school might be somewhere that's like, okay, also I know that this is part of routine, and this is what we do at school. And quite often what we see in therapy is if they're trying new foods, they might start off in therapy. The second place that is going to be more successful is at school or nursery. And the place we work on last is at home, because we're also changing kind of the relationship between the family around food and meal times. And it's quite sensitive in some ways. So it's a lot harder to get to that point straight away. But it is kind of typical that you'd see that at school versus at home.
Right. So basically, it's kind of children mimic again what we were talking about, that they model behavior. So if they have kids around them,
and there's the routine, right? That's the routine of this is what we do at school, and probably I can't get away with as much because everybody's doing the same thing. So it's looking at what's going on, what happens around a mealtime at home, and how the parent is responding, how the child is responding. Those are really kind of key things that we need to understand before we can give the advice.
Okay. Thank you. And that's for you, Anushka. Many parents feel anxious about portions and nutrition. So how do we know what is the right portion and what is not the right portion?
Okay, so kids are actually intuitive eaters. It is adults who kind of structure food and portions out. So they actually know what their bodies need. So what we want to do is, I like telling parents, have a buffet kind of thing where you have all of the foods and let the child pick how much ever they want. So they understand, okay, what fills me up? How much can I actually have? It also allows them to have autonomy. So my thing is, always have more fats and protein at the table. Give them a portion of, give them some carbs that are cooked well, and then have a little bit of your fiber, but that's much later, so not for infants. So let them pick and choose, and they'll always go for the fats and proteins over time.
Okay. All the best for the parents, because I've struggled with this, because in my head, a portion should look like a specific portion. And I think, oh, and there was a time when I used to go like, her stomach should be about this much, so at least this much food should go inside it. So yeah, that's the nice way to put it. Thank you. For Sita, one of the parents want to know about, again, screen time, like when children rely on screens for constant distraction to eat, what is usually happening underneath, and what are the long-term trade-offs? I think we've already discussed that, but what are the long-term trade-offs? If you could shed some light on that.
I guess, again, it's that experience that the child is having with food, and that kind of being involved, being immersed in what's kind of happening around me. It will impact on the social side of it as well. You're going to a restaurant and everybody sat at the table, eating together, talking together, and you've got your child on the iPad, and that's the only way you can eat them. It does impact socially. We want to try and minimize it. It's hard to kind of completely get rid of it straight away, but the more you can kind of head towards having that child at the table, having that social experience, being interested in their food, it's just a better all over kind of experience for the child, and kind of sets up for the future. Because you think about it, you don't want a 25-year-old only being able to eat in front of their iPad. So we have to break that down early on.
Right. So it's all about what they see is what they learn, sort of a scenario. Okay. This one is directed to Anushka. Is it important to give protein-rich foods to a 3-year-old in every meal? And how much is too much or too less?
Protein, fats, very important, no matter what age you are, especially for young kids. Let them intuitively decide how much to give, because we're so fixated on numbers. That's how parents are trained by their doctors, right? How many mils of milk has your child had, or ounces, or what is the growth chart? We don't want to do that. Each child has a different body composition. Some kids are lean, some kids are not. Some kids metabolize faster, some don't. So it's very important to support them where they're at. Protein rich meals, yes. The amount, let your child choose and let your child figure. Because the more autonomy you give them and the more safe they feel, if they're hungry, they will eat more. If they need more food, they will eat more. So don't come in with the anxiety of, if I don't put this much in her or his plate, they're just going to starve. They're not going to do that at all.
So
they'll
look
give
at
signals, won't they, if they want more?
Yeah. Okay, great. And another question is that a lot of parents are worried that stuff that the foodstuffs that they are allergic to, they don't introduce, or what they don't like, they don't introduce to their children. How right or wrong is it, and how can it affect their relationship, the children's relationship with food later on in life?
Kids are going to eat things whether their parents like it or not. So it's more of what the lifestyle of your family is like. So some parents don't eat certain foods, and you want to introduce that to your child, you can. It's not ethically right or wrong. They're just going to eat it eventually if someone else introduces it to them. So as long as the food that you have at home is nourishing, is healthy, makes everyone happy, that's the goal.
And how about the allergens? Like, a lot of parents, they have some allergies, or families, they have allergies.
Yeah.
Should we totally not introduce those to kids when we start feeding, or how should we go about that?
You have to be very careful when introducing allergens. You have to know what to do when things go wrong. So I would always say consult with someone like your pediatrician, your nutritionist, while you're on that process. It is always beneficial to give allergens at a younger age while you're building their gut health, so there's no trigger, but also so that they don't have those allergens that their parents do. So that's something that I would always encourage, but please do it with someone supervising you or guiding you.
Okay, this is for both of you. You both have specifically told that when should, what are the signs to look out for when a feeding therapist may be required or a nutritionist should be required. What are the telltales to know when both of the people are required, and how should parents go about it?
Well, for me, it's getting them in to have that consultation first, and then I'm very clear on that these are the things that I know we can work on here, but actually it's time to go and see another professional. So I would do that initial assessment and then advise from that. Just having, I usually take a detailed kind of note of what the food looks like from breakfast up until dinner. And if I'm noticing certain patterns there, then I will recommend a nutritionist, pediatrician, whichever professional is needed.
Okay, great. And how about you, Anushka?
I think honestly the same thing. We have to first see what we're dealing with, note the patterns down, and then, be able to give the right advice. Often we get flooded with messages that are so urgent in nature, and you can't really anticipate what the issue is like that.
I think so. Yeah, like a combined approach. But is there like do doctors go that route that if you take them to a feeding therapist, or I think first they come to the pediatrician who kind of tells them that whether you should go the therapy way or should you go to the nutritionist way. So are there a certain set of questions that the parents can ask or should ask before making this informed decision? Ask the pediatrician, that is, because I don't know. I don't think they understand when is help really, really needed, and in case they do identify that, then which approach to take, where to go first.
I think the pediatrician will look at kind of the overall health, and if not enough food or not enough variety of food is impacting health. And I think quite often, if health looks okay and they're doing fine, then it's like, let's monitor and wait and see. But if we go back to are they getting really, really fussy? Are they dropping more and more food groups? Is there a lot of pressure and anxiety at mealtimes? Then as a parent, that's, you can use those flags as, right, I need to get that extra help. Pediatricians often, they will refer, but again, like I said, it will be when they're seeing a bit more of an impact on health, and maybe even kind of mental health as well.
Okay. Well, yes, I'm sure. Anushka, would you like to add something to that?
Yeah, I also think that sometimes a mom's gut instinct is a lot sharper than an expert. So I always tell parents, if you feel like something is wrong, check in with other parents, see if they've been to like a feeding therapist, if they have someone to recommend. But I would always say there's nothing wrong with going to 3 experts and getting a solution as compared to being anxious at home and trying to just wait it out. So we don't want to just, do something when it's so bad. We also want to take preventative measures, and that's perfectly fine.
Right. Thank you. I think that wraps it for all of us. And you were absolutely wonderful and patient. Thank you, Anushka and Seeta. Thank you to all the parents and all the mums who could spare their Saturday to come and join us in this very enlightening discussion. We would be taking, the parents are still kind of writing in questions, but we will be taking these questions up with our panelists, and we'll be probably posting them out or getting in touch with you, and we'll get all of the questions answered. Thank you so much for joining in, ladies, mothers, parents. It was really nice of you. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Have a happy weekend, everyone. Thank you. Thank you.